At 67, I buried my husband. 6 months later, I found out he was not dead. And I know how that sounds. I know. But stay with me, because what happened next was worse than the funeral. My name is Marlene Hart. I live out in the suburbs outside Philadelphia. I am 67 years old, and the day I realized my husband had been planning his disappearance while I was planning our retirement, something in me went cold. Not broken. Not hysterical. Just clear. Before I get into it, please like, share, and subscribe. These stories take time to make, and your support keeps them coming. And when the first major betrayal lands, I am going to ask you to leave a comment. Because women need to know they are not alone in this kind of quiet devastation. It started with a phone call that made me feel like a widow before I even understood the words. I was at my kitchen sink rinsing blueberries. I remember that because my brain keeps handing me these tiny stupid details like receipts. Like the universe wants proof that I was living a normal life right up until the second it ended. My phone rang and the number was blocked. A man said my husband's full name like it belonged to a file, not a person. He did not ask if I was sitting down. He did not ease into it. He sounded calm, like he'd said it before. He said there had been an incident overseas. He said he was sorry. He said the American embassy had been notified. And then he said a sentence that did not fit inside my head. "Mrs. Hart, your husband is deceased." I did not scream. I did not drop the phone. I did not even cry. I just said that's not possible. Because my husband, Grant Hart, did not die. Not in my imagination. Grant was the kind of man who always came back. He traveled for work. He traveled constantly. I spent decades learning how to sleep beside an empty space and act like it was normal. He'd disappear for a week, sometimes 2. Then he'd come home with a small gift, a tired smile, and that tone that said, "Please do not ask too many questions. Even though you're my wife." And his job title sounded boring. That was always the joke. Grant was an international logistics compliance advisor. That's what his business card said. It sounded like shipping forms. Import regulations. Dry, safe, forgettable. It did not sound like the kind of job that paid what it paid. Grant made excellent money. He always had. Our home was paid off early. Our savings grew fast. Our retirement accounts were fed enough that friends made comments. "Grant must be some kind of genius," they'd say. And Grant would laugh and say, "I just hate paperwork." That was our life. A husband with a boring title who traveled a lot. A wife who kept the house running. A marriage that looked steady from the outside. That phone call shattered all of it. The man on the phone used careful words. He said incident. He said international jurisdiction. He said not advisable when I asked if I could see Grant. When I asked where Grant was, he gave me a country name I'd heard Grant mention maybe twice. And both times it was casual, like it was no big deal. When I asked if there would be a body, he paused and then said, "Mrs. Hart, due to the condition, a viewing is not recommended." And that was when the air in my kitchen changed. Not because of grief. Because of control. Because even in death I was being managed. I remember saying, "I'm his wife." And the man said, "Yes, ma'am. That's why I'm calling." That should have comforted me. It didn't. It made my skin crawl, like he was reminding me my role was to comply. That night my daughter Elise came over. She's 42. She worries in practical ways. She checked my fridge, made tea, and kept asking questions like we were solving a problem. My son Michael called from Chicago. He's 45. He was quiet. Too quiet. He kept saying, "Mom, I'm so sorry," and then he'd go silent like he was holding something back. That was the first crack. Michael asked me, "Did they tell you not to talk about it?" I said, "Not exactly." He said, "Did they tell you what happened?" I said, an incident. He exhaled and said, that's what I thought? What's what you thought? I asked. And he said nothing. I love you. I'm flying in tomorrow. That was the moment I realized my son was scared, not sad. The next day, people started arriving at my house. Not family. Not friends. Men in suits with polite faces and careful smiles. They didn't introduce themselves with full details. Just first names and vague roles. One said he worked with Grant in a coordinating capacity. One said he was there to assist with arrangements. One said he was a point of contact. They spoke to me like I was fragile glass. They offered help, then gently steered the conversation away from anything that sounded like truth. When I asked if Grant had suffered, one of them said, Mrs. Hart, he did not suffer. He said it fast, like a line he'd practiced. When I asked where the remains were, he said, they are being handled. Being handled. Like my husband was a package. Like he was not mine. And then he did something small that made my stomach flip. He called me Marlene like we were friends. Like he'd earned it. The funeral happened 10 days later. 10 days. That should have been warning number 2. Nothing in our life moved quickly unless someone wanted it to. They said Grant would be cremated. They said it was simpler. They said it was best. They said it was recommended. I remember staring at the closed casket at the front of the chapel and thinking, I'm burying a story, not a person. The chapel was full. Friends came. Neighbors came. People from Grant's old office came. And then there were others. People I didn't know. A woman in her 50s with calm eyes stood near the back and watched me like she was memorizing my face. 2 men didn't sit. They stood along the wall like security. They never looked at the casket. They looked at the crowd, the exits, and then back at me. After the service, people hugged me and said the same phrases. He was a good man. You were lucky. He loved lucky. That word hit wrong. Like they were trying to wrap my grief in a ribbon. I nodded and thanked them like a machine. Then the woman with the calm eyes approached. She did not hug me. She took my hand for one moment, like a nurse checking a pulse, and she said, You did well. Those exact words. You did well. Not I'm sorry. Not he'll be missed. Not how are you holding up. You did well. I stared at her and said, Excuse me. She smiled slightly and said, You were strong. Grant would have wanted that. Then she walked away. I asked Elise who she was. Elise said, Maybe a colleague. I said Grant never had colleagues like that. Elise looked at me and said, Dad never had colleagues that you met. That was the first big hook. At the time, I thought it was honesty. I was wrong. Because what she really meant was, Dad kept you outside the fence on purpose. After the funeral, I became the widow. It sounds simple, but it's a role. It comes with expectations. People expect you to be sad in the right way. People expect you to speak kindly about the dead. People expect you to keep their memory tidy and their reputation shiny. And when your husband is considered important in some vague way, people expect you to be discreet. Grant's old department sent flowers. A large arrangement. Expensive. A card signed by 3 names I didn't recognize. Neighbors brought casseroles. And within days I was fielding calls about pensions and benefits and accounts. And that's where my grief started turning into something else. Because grief is heavy, but it's honest. What came next felt dishonest. The first odd thing was Grant's pension office. He'd been retired from government work for 5 years. After that, he took a consulting role. He still traveled. He told me his pension was locked in. He told me I'd be taken care of. When I called to report his death, the woman on the line paused. She said, We have not received confirmation. I said, I'm his wife. I'm confirming. She said, We need official documentation. I said, I can send the death certificate. She said, Yes, ma'am. when it is issued. I said it should already be issued. Another pause. Then she said it is not in our system. That was a small humiliation. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a polite wall that made me feel ridiculous for asking. A week later I got an email from an insurance provider. Not life insurance. Travel insurance. It said there was an open case requiring follow-up. I called. The man on the line asked questions that made my stomach tighten. Has the insured made contact? He asked. I said he's dead. He said, yes ma'am, I understand. We just need to confirm. Has anyone heard from him? I said, why would anyone hear from him? He hesitated, then said, because we've had situations where a missing person is declared deceased before verification is complete. I said he isn't missing. He's deceased. He said, we have not received confirmation from the relevant authorities. Relevant authorities. That phrase started showing up everywhere, like fog. Then, 2 months after the funeral, I got a letter from a bank I'd never heard of. It was addressed to Grant. It said his account required action, and failure to respond could result in restrictions. I stared at it. Grant didn't open accounts without telling me. Not anymore. Not after the fight 15 years ago when he forgot to mention a credit card and I found it by accident. I remember that argument like it was yesterday. Grant looked at me like I was interrogating him and he said, Marlene, I don't hide things from you. I believed him. Now I was holding proof that I'd been wrong. I called the number on the letter. I gave Grant's details. I expected the representative to say, we're sorry for your loss. Instead, she asked, can you verify his current contact number? I said, he's dead. She said, yes, ma'am, I'm just verifying. I repeated myself slower. She said, I understand. The system is prompting. The system is prompting. That's when fear really set in. Because systems don't prompt for dead people unless someone built them to. Or unless someone is still answering. That night I sat in my bedroom with Grant's old laptop on my knees. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. It felt like trespassing. It also felt like survival. I tried his usual passwords. The ones I knew. None worked. I stared at the screen and felt a sting behind my eyes that wasn't tears. It was rage. Because Grant had locked me out of his life while I was still his wife. Then Elise called. She said, Mom, are you okay? I said no. She said, do you want me to come over? I said not yet. She hesitated. Then she said, Mom, can I ask you something? I said, yeah. She said, did Dad ever tell you what he actually did? I said he did. Logistics compliance? Elise didn't laugh. She said, did that ever make sense to you? I swallowed. It made enough sense. Elise went quiet. Then she said, I always thought he was more than that. What do you mean? I asked. She said he would disappear, then he'd come back different. Not like cheating, like watched. Watched. That word landed like a stone. That was the next small hook. People close to him always knew something was off. They just accepted it. Because Grant told stories that made doubt feel rude. Then at the 3-month mark, the first real anomaly hit. It was a simple notification on my phone. An email alert from an old shared account we rarely used. It said there'd been a login attempt, from overseas. From a city name that sent a cold wave through my body. Because I'd seen that city on Grant's itineraries over and over. He always called it a transit hub. Always said he was only there for a night. Always said it was boring. My hands started shaking. I told myself it could be a hacker. I told myself it could be a glitch. I told myself grief makes you paranoid. Then 10 minutes later, another alert came. A 2-factor authentication request. A code. Someone was trying to get in. Someone knew the password. Someone was close enough to trigger the system. I stared at the screen until it went dark. And then I did something I had never done in my marriage. I didn't call my husband. I didn't ask him. I didn't give him the chance to explain. I wrote it down. Date, time, location. And I said out loud, to my empty bedroom, Grant, what did you do? At the time, I thought paperwork was the worst part. I was wrong. Paperwork is annoying. What came next felt like a trap closing. A week later, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as Mr. Avery. He said he was with an agency liaison office. He didn't specify which agency. He said he wanted to check in. He asked how I was coping. Then he asked, has anyone reached out to you claiming to have information? I said no. He said if they do, don't engage. Why? I asked. He said, there are people who take advantage of situations like this. Are you talking about scams? I said. He hesitated, then said, among other things. Among other things? Then he said, Mrs. Hart, it's important that you don't independently pursue any inquiries into Grant's death. I gripped the phone. He said because you may interfere with processes already in motion. My mouth went dry. What processes? I asked. I can't discuss that, he said. Then he added, softer, for your own safety. That word doesn't belong in a widow's life, not unless the death isn't simple. That night I asked Michael if he knew anything. He flew in and sat at my kitchen table like he was a boy again. I showed him the login alerts. I showed him the bank letter. I told him about Mr. Avery. Michael's jaw tightened. Mom, he said, did Dad ever talk about his work? He talked around it, I said. Michael nodded, slow. Then he said, when I was in college, he told me never to mention his job title to anyone. I stared at him. He said if anyone asked, I should say he worked in compliance. He said it like it was rehearsed. Rehearsed. Something in me shifted. A line got crossed. Michael, I said, do you think your father is alive? He didn't answer right away. He stared at the table. Then he said, I think Dad has always been capable of things we didn't want to imagine. That was the moment it stopped being grief and became betrayal. And this is where I'm going to ask you to comment. If you've ever been lied to in a way that made you question your whole life, please leave a comment below. Not to relive it. Just to remind other people they aren't crazy for feeling it. Because what happened next made me realize I'd been married to a man I didn't truly know. At the 4-month mark, a package arrived at my house with no return address. A plain brown envelope. Inside was a key. Just a key. And a small slip of paper with an address. No explanation. No note. No love. Just an address in New Jersey. Elise told me not to go. Michael told me to call the police. And part of me wanted to be sensible. But another part of me had been dismissed and managed for months. And I was done being handled, so I drove there the next morning. The address led to a storage facility. I parked and sat in my car for a full minute, staring at rows of metal doors. My hands were sweating. My heart was pounding. And all I could hear in my head was that woman at the funeral. You did well. Like someone grading my performance. I walked into the office and gave the man behind the desk the unit number. He looked at his screen. Then he looked at me. Then back at the screen. Are you authorized? He asked. I'm his wife, I said. He hesitated. The authorized contact is listed as Grant Hart. My throat tightened. He's deceased, I said. His eyebrows rose. That isn't what the file says. That sentence nearly knocked me over. Because it was the first time someone said it plainly. Not a prompt. Not a delay. Not missing paperwork. The file said he was alive. I forced myself to breathe. Can you show me? I asked. He turned the screen slightly. The account was active. Paid. Updated. There was an emergency contact number. It wasn't mine. I stared at it, memorized it. Then I said, I need access to the unit. I can't release it without authorization, he said. I held up the key. Someone sent this to my home. He looked uncomfortable. Then he said, there's also a secondary authorization code. Where? I asked. He checked the file. It's set to be provided by the account holder. I felt dizzy. He's the account holder, I said. The man shrugged. Not rude. Just helpless. I left the office and sat in my car again. I could have driven home. I could have decided it was too much. Instead, I called the emergency contact number. It rang twice. Then someone answered. A woman. Calm voice. Professional. Hello, she said. Who is this? I asked. A tiny pause like surprise. Then she said, May I ask who is calling? This is Marlene Hart, I said. Silence. Then she said, Mrs. Hart. My stomach turned. Who are you? I asked. I am a friend of your husband, she said. My husband is dead, I said. I know what you have been told, she said. That was the hook that confirmed everything without giving me comfort. My voice shook. Is he alive? Another pause. Then she said, Mrs. Hart, you need to leave the facility. Answer me, I said. Her voice lowered. You are in danger if you keep pushing. I'm in danger because my husband faked his death, I said. She exhaled slow. Please go home, and do not speak to anyone about this. Is he alive? I said. And she said, he is not available. Not available. Like he was on a business trip. My throat burned. You tell him, I said. You tell him he doesn't get to do this to me? Mrs. Hart, I am trying to keep you safe, she said. And something in me snapped. Not screaming. Clarity. No, I said. You're trying to keep him safe. Then she hung up. I sat there staring at those metal doors. And I realized something that made my skin go cold. Grant hadn't just faked his death. He'd built a system around it. And everyone was following it. That night I didn't sleep. I pulled out old files, tax returns, travel itineraries. I made a list of every place Grant said he'd been. I looked for patterns. And I found them. Grant traveled in loops. The same few cities. Always short stays. Always vague explanations. Always sudden urgency. Then I checked our finances. And I saw what I never wanted to see. Transfers. Not huge. Not obvious. Small amounts. Regular. Always labeled consulting expenses. But the names weren't consulting firms. They were private individuals. Then I found the third hook. A document Grant had signed years ago. A personal guarantee. In my name. Not with my signature. With a signature that looked like mine if you didn't look too closely. I stared at it until my eyes blurred. My husband had forged my name. Calmly. While I cooked dinners and folded laundry and trusted him. I showed Michael. His face went pale. Mom, he said, this is fraud. Elise covered her mouth and whispered, Oh my God. And that was the moment we understood the motive. Grant didn't disappear to be dramatic. He disappeared to escape consequences. Because if he was dead, the guarantees might never be enforced. If he was dead, nobody interrogated him. If he was dead, he could step out of the life he ruined and leave me holding the bag. The death wasn't an ending. It was his exit plan. I hired a lawyer. Not flashy. Not loud. A calm woman named Judith Kaplan, with a voice like a judge and eyes that missed nothing. I slid the forged guarantee across her desk. She looked at it and said, How long has he been gone? 6 months, I said. Judith nodded once. Marlene, she said, your husband didn't just abandon you, he set you up. That sentence hurt more than the funeral. Because it made it personal. Not mysterious. Not glamorous. Not espionage. Personal. Judith told me to do 3 things. First, stop speaking to anyone from the agency. Second, stop telling people I was confused or grieving too hard. Third, document everything. Then she said something I'll never forget. If your husband is alive, she said, the worst thing you can do is chase him. Chasing warns him, we're going to build a net, quietly. A net. That word made me feel like myself again. Not a widow. A woman with a spine. Over the next weeks, little hooks kept arriving. A credit monitoring alert. A new a medical insurance claim. A tiny pharmacy charge in New Jersey. New Jersey again. Same state as the storage unit. Same state as the address. Then one morning I got an email from a travel agency I didn't recognize. It was addressed to Grant. Your itinerary has been updated, it said. I stared at it and felt something ugly. Like the universe wasn't helping me. It was testing me. To see if I'd stay quiet like everyone expected. At the 7-month mark, the next major twist hit. Judith pulled records through formal channels. Property documents. Corporate filings. Trust registrations. And she found a trust. A trust Grant created 3 years before his death. It was called the Hart Family Continuity Trust. That name alone made me sick. Continuity. Like he planned for the family to continue without me. The beneficiaries were listed. Michael. Elise. Not me. I stared at the page and felt something go hollow. Because even before he disappeared, Grant had decided I did not belong in the future. Judith watched my face. Breathe, she said. This is information. Not a verdict. My own children, I said. Don't jump, Judith said. People can be listed without understanding what they signed. I wanted to believe that. Then Elise said something that made the room go silent. Mom, she said, Dad asked me last year to sign something. I turned slowly. What? Her eyes filled. He said it was for taxes. He said it would protect. My throat tightened. What did you sign? Her voice dropped. I don't know. I didn't read it. That was another big hook. Grant used our children as tools. Not like a movie monster. Like a selfish man who believed his plan mattered more than our lives. Michael clenched his jaw. Dad always knew how to get people to do things, he said. He made it sound reasonable. That's how Grant operated. He never demanded. He guided. He framed. He made doubt feel childish. Judith kept building the net. She contacted the unknown bank. She flagged the forged guarantee. She notified credit agencies. She created paper trails that forced systems to notice. And the more we did it, the more resistance we felt. Not from criminals with guns. From polite walls. From delays. From we can't confirm. From we can't discuss. From for your safety. Then came the most chilling moment. A man showed up at my front door. Not in a suit. In a simple jacket. Casual. Neighborly. He smiled like we were meeting at a barbecue. Mrs. Hart, he said. Who are you, I asked. A friend, he said. No, you're not, I said. He smiled again and lowered his voice. Your husband would want you to stop. My blood went cold. Because that meant my husband was watching me. Not from the grave. From somewhere else. Tell Grant to come home, I said. His expression didn't change. It's better for everyone if you let this go. I stepped forward until he could see I wasn't shaking. I buried him, I said. I cried for him. I defended him. I'm not being managed anymore. His eyes narrowed. There are things you don't understand, he said. I understand betrayal, I said. He held my gaze, then turned and walked away. I watched him get into a car down the street. Not a police car. Not a government vehicle. A normal sedan. And that was the twist that mattered. This wasn't a glamorous spy movie. This was a man running. A man using networks. A man hiding behind paperwork and intimidation. A man who thought I was too old to fight back. That night I called Judith. They came to my house, I said. Good, Judith said. Good, I repeated, stunned. It means the net is tightening, she said. And for the first time the fear shifted. It wasn't only mine. It was theirs. At the 8-month mark, Judith made a move that changed everything. She filed a formal report for identity fraud. Not against a vague unknown. Against my husband. She also filed for emergency financial protection. She froze what she could. Then she did the one thing that forced the system to wake up. She flagged that a death may have been staged. That wasn't emotional. It was strategic. And it did what we needed. Files crossed. Systems talked. Contradictions lit up. 2 weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, older, controlled. Mrs. Hart, she said, this is Special Agent Lillian Reyes. Agent. My stomach dropped. Agent Reyes confirmed dates, addresses, names. She asked about the funeral. She asked about the storage unit. She asked about the forged guarantee. Then she said something that made the room tilt. We have reason to believe your husband is alive, she said. I pressed a hand to my chest. So I'm not crazy. A pause. No, ma'am, she said. You are not. Reyes didn't tell me everything. She didn't need to. She told me enough. Grant's mundane title had been a cover. His travel wasn't random. There were open questions about his recent consulting work. Then she asked, did your husband ever mention private contracts? Side engagements? Work that didn't go through official channels? And that's where it became terrifyingly human. Because I remembered things I'd dismissed. Grant coming home tired and irritable. Grant muttering about idiots and loose mouths. Grant saying, people are greedy. Grant saying once, if you ever hear something bad about me, don't believe it. At the time I thought it was insecurity. Now it sounded like preparation. He never told me details, I said. He wouldn't, Reyes said. Then she said, Mrs. Hart, we need you to do something. What? I asked. We need you to keep behaving like a grieving widow, she said. I let out a short, bitter laugh. I've been doing that for months. Good, she said. Keep doing it. Don't tip him off. He believes you'll stay quiet. That was the turning point. Because I realized my grief was leverage. Grant believed my age made me passive. He believed I'd protect his legacy. He believed I would cushion his consequences. So I did something he never expected. I used his assumptions against him. For the next month, I played the widow. I posted a memorial photo on a private page. I attended a church event where people could see me holding myself together. I accepted condolences. I told a neighbor softly that I was trying to move forward. And while I did that, Judith and Agent Reyes tightened the net. More little hooks. A second pharmacy charge. A hotel reservation under a misspelled version of Grant's name. A prepaid phone activated in New Jersey. Then Agent Reyes called again. We've identified someone connected to your husband's disappearance, she said. The woman at the funeral, I said. A pause. Yes, she said. I closed my eyes. Calm eyes. You did well. She's been acting as an intermediary, Reyes said. Intermediary. Another clean word for something dirty. Your husband has been in contact with her, she added. My fingers hurt from gripping the phone. So he's alive, I said. Yes, Reyes said. Plain. Alive. My husband was alive. And he let me bury him. That betrayal was so intimate it stole my breath. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead I sat down. Because rage is loud. Loud would help him. Ray's told me Grant had been under quiet scrutiny months before he disappeared. Not for his old government role, for what he did after. His consulting. The transfers. The forged guarantee. He used my name to secure something. Something went bad. Ray's didn't call it espionage or treason. She called it unauthorized activity. But I heard what she wasn't saying. Grant did something he couldn't undo. And instead of facing it, he ran. He didn't divorce me. Divorce asks questions. He didn't confess. Confession shatters the image. He chose death. Because death makes a woman quiet. That was the cruel genius of it. At the 10-month mark, the final sequence started. Ray's warned me he might contact me to test my loyalty. Test my loyalty? Like loyalty was still his to demand. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. 3 words. Are you okay? No name. No signature. Just those 3 words. My throat tightened. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I did what Judith told me. Screenshot. Forward. No response. 2 hours later, another text. I never wanted this. Something cracked in my chest. Not grief, fury. Because he was rewriting again. Putting himself in the victim's seat. I did not respond. Then, late that night, my phone rang. Blocked number. Same kind of call that started the nightmare. I answered. Silence. Then breathing. Then a familiar voice. My husband. Grant. He sounded older. Tired. Controlled. Marlene, he said. Just my name. I closed my eyes. You let me bury you. A slow exhale. I didn't have a choice, he said. I gave a short laugh. You always had a choice. You just picked yourself? You don't understand what was happening, he said. I understand I stood in a room full of people and accepted condolences while you were alive somewhere else, I said. I did it to protect you, he said. There it was. The noble lie. No, I said. You did it to protect you. His voice sharpened. Marlene, listen, you need to stop what you're doing. What I'm doing, I said. Talking to lawyers. Talking to people. Digging, he said. So you've been watching me, I said. He didn't answer. Grant, you forged my name, I said. That's complicated, he said. Complicated. Another clean word. You used me, I said. I did what I had to do, he said. I stared at the dark window. You did what you wanted to do. A beat of silence. I need you to trust me, he said. Trust. After months of lies. After a funeral. After a fake death. You have the nerve to ask me for trust, I said. If you keep pushing, you'll make things worse, he said. Worse for who, I asked. For all of us, he said. All of us. Like he was still part of my life. You're not one of us, I said. His breathing changed. Frustration. I can come back, he said. We can fix this. Fix this. Like it was a broken appliance. You can't fix what you did, I said. His voice dropped lower. Do you want to know why I did it? Yes, I said. He hesitated. Then he said, because I was being set up. Because they were coming for me. Because I couldn't let them destroy everything, so you destroyed me instead, I said. Silence. Then he said, I didn't think you'd survive it. That landed like a slap. You didn't think I'd survive grieving you, I said. You've always been strong, he said. No, I said. You've always treated my strength like something you could spend. His breathing was heavier now. I need you to do something, he said. No, I said. I need you to tell them you were mistaken. I need you to tell your lawyer to stop, he said. No, I said. Marlene, he said. Grant, I said. You faked your death. You let me bury you. You left fraud in my name. And now you want me to protect you. His voice went cold. If you don't, you'll lose more than you think, he said. And that was the moment the last layer fell away. The protect you mask. The no choice mask. Underneath was the truth. He still believed fear would work on me. I spoke slowly. Grant, I said. I already lost you. I buried you. That was my worst day. You can't threaten me with loss when I've already lived it. Then I hung up. I didn't collapse. I didn't cry. I sat there with my phone in my hand and realized I'd crossed the point of no return. The next morning, Agent Reyes called. Did he contact you? She asked. Yes, I said. Did you record it? She asked. Yes, I said. Because Judith had prepared me. She told me to use a call recorder app for unknown numbers, just in case. Grant thought he was calling a grieving widow. He was calling an evidence file. You did well, Reyes said. Hearing that phrase again made my skin prickle. A woman at the funeral said that to me, I said. It's a phrase used to reinforce compliance, Reyes said. Compliance. That had been my life for decades. Keep it smooth. Don't push. Don't ask too much. But now compliance worked in my favor. Because I'd been compliant enough to keep him comfortable. And now I had rope. Over the next 2 weeks, everything accelerated. A bank froze the unknown account. A credit bureau flagged Grant's identity. A federal office requested more documentation. Then Reyes told me they tracked Grant to a location. Not overseas. Not exotic. A small rental house in New Jersey. 20 miles from the storage unit. He'd been close. Close enough to visit if he wanted. Close enough to watch. Close enough to build a new routine while I lived in grief. That detail turned my stomach. We are moving, Reyes said. Are you arresting him? I asked. That depends on what we find, she said. Because it meant Grant wasn't only in trouble for faking his death. He was in trouble for what he ran from. The day they moved in, I didn't sit by the window. I didn't wait like a sad wife hoping for answers. I went to the grocery store. I bought bread, milk, something for dinner. I lived like I was free. Because I realized Grant didn't own my emotions anymore. Then Judith called. Marlene, she said, they have him. I stopped in the cereal aisle. My hands were steady. Alive, I said. Yes, she said. I closed my eyes. What I felt wasn't relief. It was vindication. They found documents, devices, cash, Judith said. And they found your forged guarantee linked to a larger scheme. Scheme. Another clean word. It meant Grant wasn't the victim. He was a participant. He ran because he did something wrong. And he left me holding it. You're protected now, Judith said. We're moving to clear your name. Clear my name. That was what mattered. Not revenge. Not a dramatic confrontation. Truth. Because truth gives you back your dignity. Agent Reyes called later. Mrs. Hart, she said. We need a formal statement, and you need to understand some aspects of your husband's work won't be discussed publicly. I don't care what he did for them, I said. A pause. I care what he did to me, I said. Understood, she said. Then she added, your husband staged his death to avoid accountability. He believed your grief would keep you quiet. He was wrong, I said. Yes, ma'am, she said. Heva. In the weeks that followed, the consequences landed like dominoes. Grant's accounts were seized. The trust was frozen. My name was removed from liabilities once the fraud was confirmed. Elise cried more than I did. Michael went quiet for days, then finally said, I don't know who he was. Neither did I told him. People in our community started hearing whispers. Not everything. Not the classified parts. But enough. Enough to change how they talked about him. Enough to crack that good man reputation. And here's the part that still makes me shake my head. Grant tried to send a message through Judith. not an apology. A request. He wanted me to publicly say I'd been mistaken. He wanted me to preserve his image. Even then. Even after everything. He still wanted the story to benefit him. Judith asked me what I wanted to do. I didn't hesitate. No, I said. So she sent back a simple response. Mrs. Hart will not be making any statements on your behalf. That was it. No rage. No long speech. Just refusal. And that refusal was the most powerful thing I did in my whole marriage. Because Grant built his life on the belief that I would cushion his consequences. I stopped cushioning. I let the truth do the damage. People asked me if I felt sorry for him. I told them, I already mourned him. I already buried him. He doesn't get more from me. Some asked if I would ever speak to him again. I said everything I needed to say at his funeral. He just wasn't there to hear it. And the truth is, I didn't need a dramatic room or tears or excuses. I needed control. I needed my name back. I needed my life to belong to me again. Grant faked his death because he thought it would erase consequences. He did not understand something. A woman who survives decades of quiet disrespect is not fragile. She is practiced. She is patient. And once she stops protecting you, you are finished. My name is Marlene Hart, and this was the last straw. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe.